Them birds gon' fly, you already know. Rain, sleet, or snow, Eagles train to go.
All right, let's talk about it. Denver Broncos at Philadelphia Eagles for Week 5. Just like I thought it was going to be, it was a good defensive game for both teams at different points of the game. Both teams started off with punts, going 3 and out to start their drives. And, to keep the drive alive for Denver when they had the ball the second time, Jalen Carter had a offsides on a 4th and 2. He knows better than that, but, things happen. They were able to get him to jump on something that the Eagles have done to other teams in the past. And on that same drive, Cooper DeJean had a strip that was reversed by the refs, saying that Bo Nix had forward motion on his pass, when clearly you can see that it was a strip before the hand moved forward. But nevertheless, they gave the ball back to the Broncos, and they were able to capitalize with a 55-yard field goal from their kicker. So the kick looked like it was a difficult one. It didn't even look like it was going in, but it went in, and they were able to start the game 3-0 to start things. Jalen Hurts started off throwing the ball to start the game, so it looks like, they listened to the fans for whatever reason. I don't know why they did that, but I guess they wanted to establish the throw. But if you've been having a hard time running how they've been having a hard time running, I think it would be better to establish the run on a type of defense like Denver. But they started off throwing the ball. A.J. Brown had a big first down. Saquon Barkley had a big run that was a left side toss that went for 17 yards. What I won't understand is why Kevin Patullo doesn't run more of those plays, because on that play right there, that was probably the biggest gaps and holes that Saquon have seen all season, and he was able to actually get a good run going, got the whole team moving to that side, and that was the best run of the year that he's had so far, in my opinion, and the best run of the game that he had. They never really went back to it. They kept establishing the throw-in. Hurts was hitting multiple receivers, so he was starting to cook in that department, but it seemed like the throw never really opened up the run for them, so they had to keep relying on it. Had a lot of success with play action, and he was also successful on some dropbacks. So the Eagles got stopped finally for the first time in the red zone this year, and were able to get a field goal out of it. So it was still a successful drive, tying the game up 3-3. And that's how the first quarter kind of ended. So it was really the defenses on both sides showing out for the first quarter, and the field goal kickers were able to get 3 points for their squad each. Moving on to the second quarter, Dobbins, the running back for Broncos, he was running really well all game. That was the type of running that the Eagles could use right now, whether it was 4-yard, 5-yard pickups. They were all positive. He was rarely stopped by the defense. That front four is not getting home to the quarterback, and they're also not stopping the run at all right now. Lot of gashes that they're taking in that department. So Dobbins was running really well, but Zadarius Smith was able to have a sack on Bo Nix on a 3rd down play that ended up making it a 4th and 21. So kept the Eagles in the game. Got the ball back, started rolling again. Hurts throwing the ball again. Grant Calcaterra tried to lay a punishment on the DB after he caught the ball for a 1st down, but he ended up taking the brunt of it, went out with an oblique injury, they said. So that's a couple weeks that he's looking out. And Jordan Mailata had a false start, something that's uncharacteristic, of him. And they've been having a lot of miscommunication this year, so that happened. And they ended up with a 3rd and 17. And so far this season, what they've been doing with those 3rd and 17s, they'll just hand the ball off and make it a run, and kind of just give up on the play. I was kind of expecting the same thing, turn around, hand it to Saquon or hand it to A.J. Dillon. But no, they did what they were supposed to do when you have star wide receivers, and that's the type of moment where you're actually supposed to throw the ball. And they were able to complete the reception to Devontae Smith for 57 yards, which was the longest of the year so far, and that was on a 3rd and 17. So that was a big deal. That was a great connection for from Hurts to Smith. And, you know, they kept the ball going. AJ drew a flag at the goal line on PS2, Patrick Surtain. And, you know, Dallas Goedert got a easy touchdown off of that. He's been racking up touchdowns for the year. I'm going to give my opinion on that later in the video. So he was able to, you know, it was a nice play design, something that the Eagles run a lot. And he was able to score off of it. And, you know, it's difficult to kind of get points down there because everything get clustered, but then it could also be easy if you have a great play for it, which is foreshadowing right now. The Eagles went up 10-3, and it was a 90-yard drive, so that was, you know, they were looking good in that part of the game. Still wasn't running the ball though. Denver kept getting penalties on Philly receivers, so they were taking advantage of that and, you know, kept throwing the ball, I guess. Dotson had a big catch, but didn't keep his feet in bounds, and it wasn't counted. And Hurts ended up getting sacked on that. And one thing I kept noticing, you know, for Jalen Carter is they don't call any holding flags for him. There's no holding penalties called for Jalen Carter at all in any game from any team, not just this game right here. You know, you can watch the plays a lot. And I know if they called every one, there'll just be 57 flags every game. But it's just, sometimes it's just blatant. And it's, if you can see it watching it, they have multiple officials on the sidelines and in the game, and they never call it, you know. And even on that Cooper DeJean strip that I was talking about earlier, you know, you can see that the most egregious thing that happened on that play was him being held before he actually made the play. But they didn't call that. So, you know, it is what it is. Hurts got sacked and they got the ball back. Both teams ended up punting before halftime, even though they both ended up with the ball back in the under 2 minutes. So we went to the halftime, 10-3, Eagles up. When the third quarter started, that was the last spark that the Eagles had for the game, hoping that Kevin Patullo can put a full 4 quarters of football together, because it's just like, wow, you know, they never start a game right or finish a game right. But the beginning of the third quarter, Jalen Hurts was able to connect with Saquon Barkley for a big touchdown reception. It was 47 yards. Saquon, you know, he put a double move on the linebacker and he fell for it, and he got great separation and great concentration by him to catch the ball. Great throw from Hurts, dropped it right in the bucket, and, you know, Saquon in open space, especially with nobody in front of him, you know, that was an easy touchdown that he got right there. So for not having any rushing yards, he was able to contribute in the passing game. And they went up to 17-3, and that was very early in the third quarter. And, you know, it's looking like a game that, okay, the Eagles are supposed to run away with this. But, you know, shout out to Denver Broncos for they kept fighting. You know, they never gave up. They never played as if they were out of the game. Dobbins kept running well. You know, he kept doing what he had to do. And when they had to eventually punt because they weren't getting anything going, even though they were attempting, when the Eagles got the ball back, they weren't helping themselves either. You know, they had opportunities in the moments that they could have went up. It could have been 24-3, which would have really changed the game for Denver. They would have had to play a whole different type of game that could have caused turnovers for the Eagles defense, but it didn't happen that way. There was a false start called on A.J. Brown, and on another play that, you know, the Eagles were very fortunate that it wasn't a pick six, because if Ufunga didn't have bad hands, he was able to bat down one of the balls that Jalen Hurts threw, and then he also had a second attempt at catching it. It hit him right in the hands. He dropped it, and it didn't work out for him. If he was able to catch that ball, that was going to be an easy touchdown for him, because there was nobody in front of him. Not even the quarterback was going to be able to stop him on that one. And on the next play, AJ was able to hit his man with a double move, and he got completely wide open. And, you know, on the broadcast, they said that it looked like he slowed down. And if you see it, you could see that he slowed down on the play, even though it looked like Hurts missed him. Hurts double pumped the ball, and in that moment, so maybe they missed timing on that. And I'm going to talk about that later in the video as well, because personal things are starting to spill over into the game, and that's unacceptable. And AJ slowed down. He definitely did. If you watch the replay, he started jogging because he wasn't expecting the ball, and then when he looked up for the ball, he wasn't in stride with what the throw was. So some will say that Hurts missed him, but you can clearly see that AJ slowed down on that play. And I think that was one of the last opportunities they had to kind of close the game, because after that was all Denver needed. They were driving. They kept driving. Quinyon Mitchell had a holding call against him. And one thing that was happening in this game that we haven't seen in a while was Quinyon Mitchell getting schooled by a wide receiver. But, Cortland Sutton, he's a veteran receiver. He's a big body receiver. He's a reception receiver on the third down plays and stuff like that. So, Quinyon Mitchell, he was right there with him. He was he was defensive. He had his hands involved in everything, but somebody got to win the play. And, Sutton was winning those plays, especially at crucial points of the game. And he was able to come down with a lot of catches that kept the drive going for his team. So shout out to him for doing what he had to do. And, Quinyon needed this type of moment to, get back in the lab and just work on some things, because everything is not always going to go your way. And sometimes you need these lessons. And, Denver was able to get back in the game with Dobbins running hard. And, they got back in there and they were able to score a touchdown to make the game 17-10. And when this happened, it was still about 13 minutes left in the fourth quarter. So, there was a lot of time left in the game. And by this time, Devontae Smith was well over 100 yards. But, that doesn't mean anything, because when you can't sustain drives, Jalen Hurts had a lot of running lanes that he didn't take. He didn't have many in this game, but I feel like this was part of catering to playing a different type of football that's not the Eagles brand of football. And he didn't really play his game in this game as well, because every running lane he had, by the time he decided to take off, they were closing in the gap on him and getting sacks. They were able to get 6 sacks recorded today, even though it was more like 4. 2 of those were running out of bounds and not making it back to the line of scrimmage, but it's still considered a sack. So there was 6 of those that happened in this game for the Broncos against the Eagles. So, not being able to sustain drives, it doesn't matter how many yards you throw for and how many yards your receiver has. It's, when you're punting the ball and giving the ball back to them, you're going to have a very tired defense. And that's exactly what happened. Even though they couldn't stop the run, I feel like the defense, they played a good game. They did what they had to do. If you start the fourth quarter with the game being 17-3, what else do you want from the defense at that point, especially when the other team has a great defense as well? Like, it's up to the offense to sustain drives and keep things going. But nevertheless, they were able to keep the drive going, and they kept the game going. And Sutton had 2 big catches that kept their drives going. Like I said, he was really putting in work out there, and they ended up scoring a touchdown. When they scored a touchdown, it was 17-16, and everybody was thinking, they're just going to tie the game up. But Sean Payton is a good head coach, like I said before the game, so he wasn't going to settle for that. We've seen this from him before when he was on the Saints, and they went for 2. And this is a game that Ringo really got exposed, that he wasn't ready for that CB2 position, because like I said last week, he had a great game because he wasn't really picked on. Baker Mayfield didn't throw to the receivers that he was covering. But in this game, if you watch the plays and you watch the game, even if you watch the highlights only and didn't watch the game, you're going to see a lot of Keely Ringo getting worked on. And that's exactly what happened in that 2-point conversion, because he bit on the inside move from the receiver, and then the receiver went out on him. It reminded me of the play that the Eagles lost a game on last year, when Darius Slay bit on the Falcons receiver on the inside move, and then he got with the outside move as well. So, That happened to Keely Ringo on this play. And as soon as you saw the separation from the receiver, you know it was over. So he lost that play, and it was 18-17. But when that happened, the game still wasn't over. The game was 18-17 with about 7 minutes and 30-something seconds left in the game. And, you know, shout out to the Broncos. They were able to get 15 points in 5.5 minutes. That's how you rally back and get yourself back in it. And they didn't just tie it up. They went for the lead, which they were successful in doing. So with 7 minutes left in the game, you know, it was up to the Eagles offense to do what they haven't been able to do the rest of the game. Now you have to try to score, and you can do that with a field goal. But once again, when you can't sustain drives and keep it moving, you can't even get Jake Elliott in the position to score those 3 points, because it was still a defensive game. If you had a decent enough drive that you were able to get 3 points out of that drive and give your defense a little time to rest, it can still be a game that could have possibly ended 20-18 in the Eagles' favor. But that's not what happened. Saquon Barkley had a big flag that on a 4th and 4 when Saquon had went in motion from Jalen Hurts sending him in motion, and then he called him back. Devontae Smith had a great catch on the 4th and 4, but it was negated. You know, you can blame Hurts for that one because it's his job to make sure that the running back that he sent in motion is set before he calls the play and, you know, makes the throw. But, you know, it's the moments, things happen. So they got flagged for that, and they had to punt it. Giving the ball back in that situation, when you playing with a team that they're on the road, they didn't come to lose. You know, they have a great head coach, a play calling head coach, an aggressive head coach, and that's what they did. They kept their foot on the gas, and they weren't trying to play to lose. They weren't trying to play to give the ball back to the Eagles, and they put themselves in position to get their kicker to do what the Eagles weren't able to do, and they took the 3 more points, making it, you know, now you need a touchdown, because when it was 21-17, you can't just get back in the game with a field goal when you get the ball back. And they were able to run the clock down because before they got that field goal, something crucial happened when Zach Bond got called for the penalty, which was actually one of the times that the Eagles were able to stop that particular play that Denver had been running the whole time. It was a play-action play where the receiver leaks out to the right, and the Eagles were able to actually stop that play. I believe it was Cooper DeJean on the tackle. They stopped the play, but while the DB was holding the legs of the player with the ball, you know, in Zach Bond's defense, there was no whistle. You know, I don't know if you can hear it, but watching it on TV, before the receiver went down, when Zach Bond was running over there was no whistle. So by the time he got to him, you know, it was a bang play. The guy was down already, and they called the flag. And it is what it is. You know, if that happened in favor of the Eagles, the fans wouldn't be complaining about that, because at the end of the day, he did hit a receiver that was already down after the whistle blew. So, you know, that gave them the opportunity to run down the clock, because I think they always planned to get a field goal anyway. They didn't want to risk any turnover in that position, but that gave them the field goal with the Eagles getting the ball back with 1 minute and 11 seconds. And this could have been a legacy game for Jalen Hurts, you know, even if there was still going to be things to complain about and clean up, because now you got to drive down the field with no timeouts and 1 minute and 11 seconds to get your team down the field. And it was happening, you know, it was happening. He was able to make a couple completions. The best one, in my opinion, was the one to Jahan Dotson on the, you know, in the middle, that he was able to run out and stop the clock. And, you know, one of the worst things that happened on that drive was taking a sack to start the drive. Like, once again, you have to play your game. When the running gap is there, take it, you know, because the play that followed it was him doing a check down to Saquon that he only took for a couple yards. He didn't even get a first down. So it's just, you got to take that. He was sacked on that play as well. You know, first play of that drive was a sack. So, you know, it just wasn't working out in their favor at all. And we could complain about the refs all we want. You shouldn't have been in that position in the first place. You know, everybody saw what happened with Dallas Goedert. that could have put them closer, at a closer attempt to end the game. But you weren't supposed to be there in the first place. You weren't supposed to be in that position in the first place. And on the Hail Mary, you weren't supposed to be in that position in the first place. The ball hit Smitty in the hands. I think AJ was trying to make a play as well on that, but he ended up like face masking and grabbing Smitty's arms on that. So I don't know whether he thought the Broncos player had the ball or not, or whatever the case may be. Those situations are bang bang plays. So I don't know what happened, but I don't think Smitty was going to really come down with it anyway, because the ball hit him in the hands, but it was in an awkward position. He didn't have any grip on it, so it wasn't like he caught the ball and didn't come down with it. It just hit him in the hands, and then he also was tackled by his own teammate, being brought down, landing on AJ. And, they both look like they got injured at the end of that play. I hope they're all right, because they lay there for a minute, but they might have been laying there out of, disappointment from the loss. And, the Denver Broncos came into Philly and they left with the dub, man. So shout out to them. There's no complaints to be made. You put yourself in that position when you lost a 14-point lead in the fourth quarter. If you look at the Broncos stats, every time they come into the game, they're never losing in the fourth quarter in the games they win. And the games they lose, if they're trailing in the fourth, they lose. And I think it's like 112 losses or something. This was the first one that they won trailing in the fourth quarter. And they got 18 points in the fourth quarter. So that's just bad discipline from the Eagles. And the game ended 21-17. So let's discuss what could have happened and things that could have been better. First of all, this defense, they're playing well enough. They're playing with a lot of heart. They're missing some things right now. Jahad Campbell is still, he's still young. So a lot of plays for him are hit or miss. I've seen a lot of plays where he was able to push the receiver or the running back out of bounds after they already got 9 yards on a quick dump off. So even though it didn't go for a big play, it's still something that's sustaining the drive and keeping the game going. So he still has a lot of tightening up to do and a lot of learning. Zach Bond, he's still flashing. He's showing what he's doing. It's not quite the same as last year, but you can't get upset with him about that play, because things happen, and he wasn't trying to hurt the team. He's a team guy. He's not gonna try to do something that's gonna jeopardize the team, and I'm sure he's beating himself up about that. But it is what it is. Things happen. These things happen. So a lot to be worked on right now with the defense and the run game. They can't stop the run. It's one thing that the offense can't get the run going. It's another thing that the defense can't stop the run. It's just bad on both sides as far as running is concerned. They can't stop the run. The front four is not getting to the quarterback at all. They're getting 1 or 2 sacks a game, and sometimes even none. And, every run play, everybody that the Eagles have played this year so far was able to get good averages at the end of the game in the run game. They were running the ball 4 yards, 5 yards, 10 yards, and they were really doing to the Eagles what the Eagles offensive line used to do to people. They were creating holes for their running back. There's some particular plays, they're running right up the gut, and the running back ends up outside of the pile, and he just got a clear open field until a safety has to tackle him or something. So the Eagles have to tighten up in that department on defense, and then I believe they will. Nakobe Dean is a great run stopper, and he's coming back. Hopefully he's perfect and healthy for when he comes back and doesn't sustain another injury trying to come back too soon, because they're going to need him in the stretch of the season. And he's good for the run. And I feel like Zach Bond performs his best when Nakobe Dean is on the field with him. He's the green dot right now, and it's a lot of pressure for him to do that as well, because everybody knows Nakobe Dean is really like the heart of calling out what the offense is doing on that side of the ball. And speaking of offense, the Eagles offense have to tighten up. They have to do a lot better than that. Saquon Barkley ran the ball 6 times in this game. I don't know why Kevin Patullo does not incorporate different type of run plays for him. Trying to go up the gut has not been working. Like I said, the best run of the day for Saquon was a toss to the left. And if you see that play, it was wide open gaps for him. I think that's about the biggest space Saquon has had all season running the ball. So they have to figure out how to get him in open space, because that's what makes him dangerous, especially with the O-line not playing up to par. Lane Johnson still dealing with an injury that's making him lose a little step. He's older now, so he really relied on health to play perfect, and now that's not been the case because he's dealing with injuries at an older age. Landon Dickerson should have never been playing. It was better to get reps with a guy of, lesser caliber than him, less talent, whatever you want to call it, and have that person be in a position to succeed over having him out there injured. And then he's battling 2 injuries again, and then he got rolled over and was injured again. So O-line just beat up right now, a bunch of plugging in people, a lot of miscommunication. Tyler Steen is doing a good job. There was the one play that got flagged that he went up to the second level when it was a run pass option, and he thought they were going to hand the ball off. So it's not really his fault in that department. Jordan Mailata is missing blocks and whiffing blocks, getting false starts, and just looking mediocre out there. The O-line is looking real mediocre, and maybe that's why the run game has not been successful. But A.J. Dillon is being underutilized as well. When he comes in and runs, sometimes the announcers, they think it's Saquon Barkley because he's actually running up the gut and he's hard to bring down. So they have to work on that, and they might have to mix it up and try a different version of a 1-2 punch with Saquon and him, because when he comes in the game, he's running the ball, but most of the time he's also there to block and just give Saquon a break. So it seems like teams are just on the Eagles' run game this year, and it doesn't help when you rush the ball 11 times all game for 45 yards. This has been the least attempts and the least yards that the Eagles have got on rushing since 2009, I believe. So it's just bad work altogether. Throwing the ball all over the place doesn't do anything for you. Last time Jalen Hurts threw the ball for 280 yards like this was in a loss to the Jets in 2023. So there's no reason to not play your game. You have to play your game. You can't play that way. You can't try to make people be happy and try to worry about stats, because you got the stats and then you got the loss. You have to do better than that. You have to play a better game than that. And, it's up to the offense to help sustain drives to keep the defense rested. If the defense is playing well all game and out of nowhere they just got to keep going back because it's a 3-and-out punt. After a while, there's going to be chinks in the armor. There's going to be cracks in the system, because you can't just keep that up. People are human and people get tired, and it's going to happen. And the offense of the other team, they're going to get going. They're going to know what they did wrong, and they have a faster chance to improve what they just did wrong on the last drive, because they're coming right back out there. They're not, they're keeping momentum. They're not losing any momentum from seeing you run drives that are going well and scoring and stuff. And, going back to that play I was talking about from earlier that could have made it 24-3. AJ is the number 1 receiver for a reason. You can't decide that, I thought the ball wasn't coming. When I looked up, I didn't see the ball. I mean, I hate to be that guy, but you get paid a lot of money to run your routes, man. Run your routes. Like, it doesn't matter if you think the ball is coming or not. You got to finish running your route. You had your man beat. Why are you jogging? It doesn't make any sense. And he's done that a couple plays. You see some play actions. Sometimes he goes in motion, and after he goes in motion, he just totally stops running and he doesn't sell the play. And it's cool to get your guy out of the play, when you go in motion. But when you look like you're not even in on the play after that, that's the only guy you're taking out of the play. You command so much attention that if you run your routes harder, and even if it's a decoy route, it's going to be better eatings for your teammate in that situation. But when you're sitting there and you're halfway running routes because you're not getting the ball on this route, or you're thinking you're not getting the ball and the ball sails right over your head, something that would have landed in the breadbasket if you were in stride. You just have to do better than that. There's nobody to blame for that. I'm not blaming him, but body language is a lot. Post-game interview, he didn't take any blame for that. And if you're going to go around talking about what the team needs to do and this, that, and the third, when something happens and it's your fault, just say it's your fault and just take it and be okay with it. But, the fact they can't do that, that's a problem. I feel like the Eagles right now, they're suffering from their own success. I don't feel like the coaching is really coaching. I feel like there's too many superstars. And, we know Nick Sirianni, he's not the type of coach that's checking anybody. If anything, he's there and he's trying to, rub you on the back or something to tell you what a great job you're doing, which is cool at times. But sometimes you got to coach these people. They need hard coaching as well, because I don't see a lot of coaches letting this happen. There's been a lot of catering to a person. You have to play your game. They're listening to the media. They're listening to the fans. I'm just a fan. I'm saying what I have to say, but you don't have to listen to what I'm saying. Play your game and win the game. But when you're listening to the noise from the outside and you're showing that you're listening to the noise from outside, why is Jalen Hurts throwing the ball 38 times? And then Saquon's running the ball 6 times. What is that formula? That is not a formula for success. That is not Eagles' identity. That is not Eagles football. For a team that was suffering with trying to find identity this season thus far, that's a bad showing. You throw the ball all over the field, still lose the game. End up in a situation where you were up 14 points in the fourth quarter, and now you're throwing Hail Marys at the end of the game. You have to make it make sense. And, like they said, you have to keep the main thing the main thing. The main thing is winning, because now you got the stats from a game. Nobody's talking about it. All the talking heads are saying, hey, man, you should have ran the ball. The same people telling you to throw the ball, and now they're telling you to run the ball. So, it's one of those things. You got to stick with what you're doing. You got to know what you're doing. You got to fix the things that you haven't fixed that you're working on, instead of worrying about other things. This type of passing display should be going well and complementing a good running game. When you're throwing the ball like that and it's not opening up the passing lanes, that's not going to help. Both teams had a lot of penalties on them, so can't blame the Zebras for this one. It is what it is. The Eagles lost that game. They lost themselves a game, because when you have 3 points in the first quarter, 7 points in the second quarter, 7 points in the third quarter, and then you lay an egg in the fourth quarter, but the other team has 18, that's bigger than refs at that point. You lost the game by yourself, So it is what it is. Hopefully they fix it. It's a short week coming up. They got to go to MetLife Stadium and go play in New Jersey against the Giants. And, hopefully that's a bounce back game for them, because one thing they have to do, they got to close out games. They got to finish games. You can't keep trying to squeeze the games out. Some teams are ridiculous, and they'll score 44 points while their opponent only has 3. But, at the end of the day, guess who's not coming back from 3 when you have 44? The other guy. It's just not going to happen. So you're going to have to start playing that type of way if you want to, be going crazy with the stats and stuff. You can't go crazy with the stats and end the game with 17 points. The Eagles have had more points in games where Jalen Hurts threw for way less and threw less times, so they have to do what they got to do to fix it. Thursday night, hopefully, they're able to redeem themselves, and I'll be back at you to talk about that in the preview. Go Birds.
Them birds gonna fly, you already know. Rain, sleet, or snow, Eagles train to go.